Post 1. Am I the jerk for hesitating about donating an organ to my twin? I never thought I'd be in a position where my family would expect me to hand over a part of my body without question. But here we are. My twin brother and my parents are all acting like my hesitation is some kind of betrayal, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm missing something, or if they're ignoring some pretty big details. I'm one of a set of twins, non identical, but everyone can tell we're related. My brother is bigger than me in every way: taller, broader, louder, more noticeable. Growing up, that made him the star and me, well, the background character. He was the one with the trophies in the living room. I was the one who made sure his laundry was done when he didn't have time because of practice. I was better at school, but you wouldn't have known it from how our parents acted. If he got a C in math, it was good enough for all the work he's doing on the field. If I got an A plus, I was told to help my brother with his homework so he could focus on his priorities. The priorities, of course, being football. From the time we were in middle school, my life started bending around his schedule. Family dinners delayed for his practices, vacations cut short for his tournaments, holidays spent driving to some other city to watch him play. And I did watch every time, because that's what you're supposed to do for family, right? Meanwhile, if I had a debate competition or a science fair, I was lucky if one parent showed up for 10 minutes. By high school, his football career had basically become the family business. My parents bought him supplements, gym memberships, new gear every season. I remember once asking if we could split the cost of a laptop so I could stop borrowing one from the school library. My dad told me, "We don't have unlimited money. We have to put it where it counts." The next week, my brother got a brand new set of cleats and a custom mouthguard. He didn't just play football, he lived it. Weight training, meal prep, studying plays like it was his religion, and our parents fueled it every step of the way. When recruiters started showing up to his games, it was like we'd been blessed by the universe. My mom cried at the thought of him going to college on a football scholarship. She cried again when he actually got one to a big American university. The send-off was ridiculous. A huge family party, banners in the yard, neighbors stopping by to wish him luck. I was basically in charge of setup and cleanup because everyone else needs to enjoy themselves. I didn't mind. Not really. It was just another day of my life. Once he was gone, I thought maybe things would quiet down. I'd gotten top grades in high school, not that anyone made a big deal about it, and earned a full ride scholarship to a top university. It felt like my first real shot at having a future that was mine. I'd only just started my first semester when the updates from my parents about my brother's games, his grades, and his coaches started rolling in. Sometimes they'd pass the phone to him, and we'd talk for a couple of minutes. It was always surface level. I didn't ask much, and he didn't tell much. Then, a few months into his first year, I got the call. It was late in the evening, and I was just finishing up some work for one of my classes when my mom's name lit up my phone. Her voice was different. Not the teary excitement she usually had when talking about my brother. This was shaky, almost frantic. "He's in the hospital," she said. "His kidneys are shutting down." My brain kind of froze. She kept talking, but it was like her words were skipping across the surface of my thoughts without sinking in. "The doctors say it's critical. They say the best option is a transplant, and since you're his twin, well, they want to start testing you right away." I didn't even know what to say. She filled the silence for me. It's obvious, isn't it? You're the perfect match. We just need you to come in tomorrow. She made it sound like this was already decided, like my only role in the process was to show up. I agreed without thinking. What else do you say when someone tells you your brother will die without your help? She said she'd call me back with the hospital's details. When I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall. My brother and I have had our share of differences, but we've also spent our whole lives side by side. This felt bigger than anything we'd dealt with before. And yet, something about it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't even name it then. Just this tiny spark of hesitation I didn't expect to feel. Anyway, this is already longer than I meant it to be, and there's a lot more to explain. I'll have to continue in part two, because things turned out to be a lot more complicated than my mom made it sound that night. Post 2. Testing and Pressure. The morning after my mom's call, I was on the first bus into the city. My scholarship classes didn't start until later in the day, but I'd already emailed my professors saying I might need some flexibility due to a family emergency. I didn't tell them what it was, partly because I didn't know how to explain it, partly because saying it out loud would make it too real. My parents were waiting for me right inside the hospital entrance. Mom hugged me so tightly I could feel her nails pressing into my back, and Dad clapped me on the shoulder with this big, relieved grin. "That's my boy," he said, like I'd just scored a touchdown instead of showing up for a medical test. They walked me down the hallway like they were escorting me to an awards ceremony. I thought I was going to see my brother first, but instead they brought me to a little office with transplant coordinator on the door. Inside was a woman with a clipboard and a kind smile who explained the process: blood tests, tissue typing, a full physical exam, even psychological screening. "It's important to remember," she said, "that these things take time. Even with a perfect match, we need to be sure both donor and recipient are in the best possible condition for surgery. That means it could be weeks before we're ready to proceed." That made me blink. My mom had told me, insisted, that my brother had days, maybe a week at most. The coordinator's calm, methodical tone didn't match the immediate crisis picture I'd been given. When she stepped out to make a copy of some forms, I asked my mom, "I thought you said this was urgent?" She waved her hand like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. "It is urgent. But you know how hospitals are with their procedures. We can't just sit around and let them drag their feet. Once they see you're his twin and a perfect match, they'll move things along." We went to my brother's room after that. He was propped up in bed, scrolling on his phone, a football game playing quietly on the wall mounted TV. He looked up, grinned, and said, "So you're stepping up? Good. Let's get this done fast. I've got a season to get back to." That was it. No, thank you. No, I appreciate this. Just straight to the point. Get the kidney, get back to football. I mumbled something about having just started my semester and how I wasn't sure how the recovery time would affect my scholarship. Mom cut me off before I could finish. "You can take a leave of absence. Your scholarship will still be there later. Family comes first." Dad added, "You'll have a better story for job interviews anyway. Shows you've got character." I don't think either of them realized how casual they sounded, as if dropping everything I'd worked for was as minor as rescheduling a dentist appointment. The tests themselves weren't bad, Just a lot of waiting rooms, blood draws, and forms. While I was sitting in the hallway outside radiology, a nurse in blue scrubs walked past me and into the room next to mine. Through the half open door, I heard her say to another nurse, "He's scheduled for dialysis tomorrow morning, right?" The other nurse nodded without looking up from a chart. That word stuck in my brain for the rest of the day. Dialysis. When Mom drove me back to the bus station, I asked her, "Why is he scheduled for dialysis? I thought you said the transplant was the only option." She glanced at me like I just asked why the sky was blue. "That's just temporary. He can't live like that long term. You're his twin. You're his chance." I asked her how long temporary meant, but she just said, "Stop overthinking. You're doing a good thing." That night, back in my dorm room, I tried to focus on my reading for class, but my mind kept circling back to the fact that nobody had mentioned dialysis until I overheard it. I didn't know much about it, just vague images from TV shows of people hooked up to machines, but it didn't sound like the kind of thing you'd do for a day or two. If it was only a stopgap, why did the nurses talk about it like it was routine? I decided I'd ask more questions at my next appointment. I'll keep explaining in part 3, because the more I learned about what actually caused my brother's kidney failure, the more this whole situation started to look different. Post 3. The real cause slips out. A couple of days later, I went back for more testing. At this point, the hospital was starting to feel like a second home, or maybe a second school, with all the sitting around, forms, and scheduled appointments. My professors had been understanding so far, but I was already missing more classes than I wanted, and I hadn't even gotten close to an actual surgery date. My brother seemed to be in better spirits when I walked into his room. He had one of those plastic hospital trays pulled up over his lap, half eaten food pushed to the side, and was watching sports highlights on his phone. "Well, well," he said, smirking. "How's my spare part doing today?" I laughed weakly, thinking he was joking, but he kept going. "I hope you've been taking care of it. No greasy food, right? No alcohol? Gotta keep it in a mint condition for me." While we were talking, my eyes drifted to a plastic shopping bag sitting on the chair by the window. Inside was a large black tub with a torn label, Weighmax Ultramass, 50 grams of protein per scoop. I'd seen tubs like that in his room at home, but never paid much attention. "What's that?" I asked. He barely looked at it. "Just supplements. Everyone uses it. It's nothing." Later, in the cafeteria, I ran into one of his old high school teammates. He didn't realize I hadn't been told everything. "Man, I told him to cut back," he said. "You can't just dump that much whey protein into your body every day, on top of a high protein diet, and not give your kidneys a break, especially if you're not hydrating enough. It'll wreck you." When I got back upstairs, I asked my mom about it. She froze for a second, just enough for me to notice, then forced a smile. "Supplements don't cause kidney failure. He's an athlete. They all use them. This is something that just happened. Bad luck." Later that evening, I brought it up to my dad over the phone. He sighed heavily. "This isn't the time to point fingers. What's important is fixing the problem." That was when I realized they weren't denying it because it wasn't true. They were denying it because admitting it would make this whole situation look different. The next time I saw my brother, I asked him directly why dialysis wasn't being considered for longer. He rolled his eyes. Because I'm not wasting years hooked up to a machine. I've got a career to think about. You think scouts are gonna wait around while I'm sitting in a clinic 3 times a week? Number, I need to be back on the field next season. A transplant gets me there. I sat in silence for a moment, trying to figure out if I'd heard him right. So, this is about football. It's about my life, he said quickly. But the way he said it told me football was part of that definition. On the bus ride back to campus, I couldn't stop picturing that torn tub of whey protein powder sitting in his hospital room like an unspoken confession. In part 4, I'll explain how I started setting boundaries and how quickly my family turned up the pressure when they realized I wasn't just going to roll over and say yes. Post 4, Standing Ground. After my last hospital visit, I decided I needed time to think before committing to anything. I figured my family would understand. After all, this was a life altering surgery. But the moment I told my parents I wanted to slow things down, it was like I'd flipped a switch. My mom's face changed instantly. Her voice went cold. Your brother is in pain every single day, and you're worried about thinking? Dad jumped in louder. You'd rather sit in classrooms than save your twin's life. It was like they'd rehearsed it. Every sentence was designed to make me sound selfish, ungrateful, heartless. My brother didn't even bother with guilt. He went straight for anger. You're killing me by stalling. Do you get that? You're literally killing me. I'm not, I started, but he cut me off. You shared a womb with me, but you won't share a kidney. Unreal. I didn't answer. There was no point. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I asked the transplant coordinator if I could speak privately with the hospital social worker. She agreed, and we sat in a small office with beige walls and a potted plant that had seen better days. I told her everything: the pressure, the guilt, the conflicting information I'd been getting from my family versus what I'd overheard from hospital staff. She listened quietly, nodding. When I mentioned the word dialysis, she didn't hesitate. For many patients, dialysis is a long term, viable treatment. I've seen people live on it for decades, depending on their overall health. It's not a death sentence. That hit me like a punch to the chest. My family had made it sound like dialysis was just a desperate, short term measure, a miserable existence that would lead to death in months. Then she added something else I'd never heard from my family. Even with a successful transplant, kidneys from living donors usually last around 10 years, sometimes longer, sometimes less. But it's not forever. 10 years, I repeated. She nodded. 5 to 15 is the general range we see, with 10 being a decent average. The recipient will often need another transplant later in life. I thought about my brother, 20 years old, talking about getting back on the field. Even if I gave him my kidney tomorrow, he'd likely be looking for another one before he was 30. And who would they expect to step up then? I left that meeting feeling like I'd been living in a completely different reality from my family. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted them to have just been mistaken, not deliberately hiding things from me. But when I tried to bring it up that night, I got my answer. 6 to 10 years is plenty of time, my mom said flatly. That's a whole career. He could be retired by then. You mean retired from football? I said. She looked at me like I was speaking another language. What else would we be talking about? I turned to my dad, and if he needs another kidney after that, we'll figure it out when the time comes, he said. His tone made it clear that we meant you. I couldn't shake the thought that they already saw me as a backup plan, not just for now, but for the rest of my life. In part 5, I'll explain the conversation where they finally said the quiet part out loud and made it crystal clear that they don't see me as a brother. They see me as a permanent spare parts bank. Post 5. The breaking point. I went into my brother's hospital room a week later, already feeling tense. He was drinking another pale beige shake from a shaker bottle, the Waymax Ultramass tub sitting right there on the table. You're still drinking that? I asked. He grinned. I'm not training right now, but I don't want to lose my gains. You realize that's part of what got you here, right? The whey protein, the insane amounts of meat, barely any vegetables, not enough water. He rolled his eyes. The doctors don't get it. Athletes eat this way all the time. This was just bad luck. Later that day, my parents came in, smiling like everything was decided. Mom said, "The coordinator says you're a great match. We just need to get your schedule lined up." I haven't agreed to this, I said. The air went still. What? My dad asked. I'm not saying never, but I'm not committing right now, I said. I have school. I have my own life. This isn't a small thing. Mom's voice went sharp. You mean to tell me you'd rather keep sitting in classrooms than save your brother's life? It's not life or death, I said. Dialysis exists. Even if I gave him my kidney, it would only last about 10 years. Then what? You'll expect me to give him my other one? There was a long pause. Then my mom said, Well, if you were willing to save him once, of course you'd do it again. I stared at her. My dad nodded in agreement. My brother actually smiled. That was the moment it hit me. They didn't see me as a person in this. I wasn't their son, their sibling. I was an organ supply on standby. I stood up. I'm not doing this. My brother's smile vanished. So you're fine with letting me die? You're not going to die, I said. You're going to do dialysis. And if you care about staying alive, you'll stop doing the same things that destroyed your kidneys in the first place. His face twisted. Without football, I'm nothing. That's not my problem, I said, and walked out. Post 6. Fallout and closure. The fallout was immediate. My phone blew up for days with calls, texts, and voicemails from my parents, relatives, even people I barely knew. Some messages were just angry. Some were guilt trips. Some were almost scripted. Family comes first. You'll regret this forever. My brother didn't waste time posting on social media either. A photo of him in his hospital bed, captioned, betrayed by the one person who could save me. No names, but everyone knew. Then came something I hadn't expected. My parents finally agreed to get tested themselves. And from the moment they did, they started complaining. What if it affects my energy? My mom said. I've read it can cause fatigue for the rest of your life. What about the long-term risks? My dad asked. I still have years of work left before retirement. I couldn't help pointing out that these were the same concerns I'd been voicing for weeks, the same ones they'd told me to ignore, because family comes first. They didn't even flinch at the hypocrisy. The tests took a couple of weeks. My dad wasn't a match. My mom was a partial match, but not ideal. The relief on her face was almost comical. I haven't seen them much since. I've gone back to my classes, my scholarship intact, my body intact. I'm not under any illusions. To my family, I'm the selfish one now, the one who let my brother's life fall apart. But here's what I know: saying no to being used doesn't make you cruel. It just means you finally understand your own worth, stand your own worth, stand your own worth.